There are thought to be over 20,000 children currently living on the streets of Hanoi. Many of them come from the country, hoping to make enough money to be able to send home to their families. But while the city might look like a better alternative, what they find is that life on the streets is far from easy. Armed with a unique philosophy, an ambitious idea, and very little else, Jimmy Phat, a concerned Vietnamese Australian, has set out to try and help some of the street children by setting up Koto, a restaurant and training school in Hanoi.
I decided I want to come back to Vietnam and make a difference. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I just knew at that time I just wanted to help.
That's like you, Uncle Jimmy.
That is me.
Jimmy Phat was born in Vietnam in 1972. He's shortly after the American War, when he was only 2. The family eventually settled in Sydney, where Jimmy's mother and some of his 5 siblings still live.
Back in 1996, I used to work for a travel company, and they sent me back for the first time to Vietnam. And after I finished my work there, I decided to go for a walk one night around the District 1, which is a very tourist area. And I met 4 street kids selling coconut. And I noticed the basket which they were carrying weighs more than actually their body weight. After striking up a conversation with them, I noticed how dirty they were, and the blisters and the ulcers on their legs. And I said to them, where do you guys shower? And they said that we shower next to an open sewer. So we end up hiring a hotel for an hour or so and actually get the kids to have a decent shower.
It didn't take long for word to get around that a generous benefactor was in town.
I mean, they try and take him for whatever he could, and I think he was burnt a couple of times. I think there were some kids who probably did take money from him, and he probably naively did think he was helping, but he will always give people the benefit of the doubt.
In the following 2 weeks, 10 children became 20, became 30, became 40, and eventually Jimmy was taking about 60 kids out to dinner.
And I sometimes just sit and wonder that life could have been mine if my mom didn't make a decision to leave Vietnam straight after the war. My life could have been so much different.
In 1999, Jimmy returned to Vietnam as a tour guide, but this time he decided to stay so that he could learn more about his own culture and find out more about the street kids. Jimmy felt that if he could just change one of the street children's lives for the better, it would be a start. The first street kid that Jimmy met was called Long. Long comes from a hill tribe town called Yen Bai, which is about 500 kilometers north of Hanoi. He is very close to his family, and he visits them whenever he can. When he was very young, his father died suddenly, and then when he was 8, he witnessed his stepfather committing suicide in front of him. And so, as the eldest boy in his family, Long had to become the breadwinner. There seemed no option for him but to head for the city to find work. And so Long walked the whole way from Yen Bai to Hanoi, following the rail track to find his way there. When he arrived in the capital, he was scared, and he was alone. Long started as a beggar, then became a shoeshine boy. And when he finally met Jimmy, he was selling postcards. By that time, he'd been on the streets for over 5 years.
Long was sort of the very first kid that I met. He went home to his friends and said, look, I found myself this great big fat turkey. Which is in direct translation was really, look, I found myself a dumb foreigner that was willing to kind of fork out a lot of money for us. And that was the mentality at that time. We opened our first Koto making sandwiches, and we catered pretty much to regular groups, tour groups, which is Intrepid at that time, for buffet breakfast, and that pretty much supported us and the original 9 kids. So it was just me and them at that time. and I thought, how hard could this be? I mean, making sandwiches and chocolate milkshake couldn't possibly be that hard. I was very wrong. It was extremely hard.
It was a difficult time for Jimmy, and he began to have doubts. He realized that if he was to make a success of this project, he was going to have to fully commit to it. And so he borrowed a substantial amount of money from his family and decided to set up a bigger restaurant called Koto, which is an acronym for Know One, Teach One. News of Jimmy's new venture travelled fast, and after a while, volunteers began to turn up.
I met Jimmy. I can remember going to this tiny little restaurant, sitting on these small stools, which was quite unusual for me at that stage, because I hadn't been in Vietnam all that long. And he told me about what he wanted to do and how he wanted to develop the training aspect of Koto. And basically how that started was that through Jimmy talking to street kids, and initially when he met them and he bought them food and you know, bandages or whatever, and they said, well, what we really want is we want to work, we want a job, we want to look after our family, and one day we want to get married. And that's how it actually started, from the idea of the street kids saying, this is what we want to do, we just don't want handouts.
So we need to prepare vegetables for our...
Jimmy and Tracy then developed a training curriculum to ensure that the young staff members were provided with both practical skills and theoretical knowledge. They would also learn about self-confidence, responsibility, discipline, and respect.
Dough film is hard. Is it changing as you're using the dough?
Yes.
Yep. 5 times. You go from 1, 3, 5. He had this vision of opening up a larger Koto, an 80-seater restaurant, taking in more street kids and developing the training. And within about 6 months of being in Vietnam, we opened up the restaurant where it is now.
There's something about what he does that you know that it's from the heart. And the kids trust him, and these kids are street smart. I mean, you know, they don't trust any person. So to actually win their trust, I think you've got to be the real thing.
I guess the most important thing that we're trying to instill in them is a sense of value. It's the value, because the value they have learned on the street has pretty much been the law of the jungle.
There's, of course, the stigma of being a street person, that people will then think, oh, well, will they steal, will they come on time, will they be clean, and so it's just impossible for these kids to have got work anywhere else in Vietnam.
I think the most important thing of helping children, especially disadvantaged children, is you have to go through a stage where they do have to learn to trust you, and it's taken me about to get this far. The second thing is to build for them a sense of family and a purpose of why they're here and why they're doing it. And I guess the last stage is, together with all the vocational training and the life skills and all that, is to give them a sense of family, something that they don't have while living on the street.
A lot of the trainees that we get involved with might be estranged from their family, or majority are living separate from their family for economic reasons. So they might be from the provinces and they come into Hanoi believing that they're going to make some money and send back to their siblings, their younger siblings in the countryside. And that often isn't the way, and it's quite dangerous out on the streets for them. When they come to Koto, Koto becomes their family for them.
I think playing an older brother role for them, I was actually very lucky enough for them to let me into their world and see firsthand how dark and lonely it can be. And sometimes it's quite hard to not being experienced enough to help them through that. But the best thing you can do is just to be there for them through their hours of needs. And I think we pretty much accomplished that, and that's how we built the trust. And the trust keeps on growing stronger and stronger every day.
And now he's got a track record behind him that people know that is true. I mean, he's stayed by the same kids for years and years and years. He's put them through school. I mean, he is their family, and he's created a family of other support people around them.
The whole point of Koto is to offer assistance to the children and to recognise their maximum potential through education, employment and financial independence, and break the cycle of poverty which has been left by their parents and their parents before that. One of the more unusual aspects of Koto is that the students are actually paid to learn. Koto regards this as essential, as it enables the trainees to focus on their studies, save a little money for their future, and also provide some financial support to their families.
In a sense, what he provides is a legitimate occupation for these people to make sure that they have a sustainable income in the future. Otherwise, there isn't a lot of hope.
You can provide vocational training till you're blue in the face, but if they don't have confidence in themselves to sustain themselves in the future, then it's going nowhere.
Tourists are often touched by the plight of the street children. Many give money, but Jimmy knows this is not a long-term solution, as it creates dependency. He wanted to change some of the children's lives forever, and one girl that Jimmy was able to take off the streets was Hui.
The first time I met Hui, she was selling postcards and little conical hats to tourists in a very busy tourist street. And like she mentioned many times before, she saw these two foreigners, myself and our trainee chef at that time, Tracy, walk across the street and straight into her life.
Hui was born in the provincial town of Huynh. Her father is a farmer and still works in the fields, despite continual illness. At the age of 13, and as the oldest child, Hui had no choice but to leave school and travel by herself to Hanoi to earn money to support her family.
And for a little girl trying to compete with all the bigger street kids who are boys, it's very hard to compete when her herself hates very much her life on the street, but she had no choice.
Khi hồi đầu tiên cháu lên đây bán hàng mà vất vả ấy, cái điều lo lắng nhất của cháu là không biết bán hàng có được hay không. Và chính vì thế mà cháu rất băn khoăn là hàng ngày đi bán hàng và luôn lo lắng là liệu tối nay có đủ tiền để gửi về gia đình cho bố cháu, hoặc có thể trả tiền cho cháu ngủ và ăn. Cháu cảm thấy rất là xấu hổ, và chính vì thế mà cháu thường xuyên đứng một mình và nghĩ là tại sao mình phải xấu hổ như thế, nên thì sẽ không kiếm được tiền, và cháu phải vượt qua cái sự xấu hổ của bản thân cháu và đi đến vẫn phải mời khách, và mặc dù biết là khách họ không muốn mua hoặc là tỏ thái độ không thích vì cái sự mời chào của cháu, nhưng mà đấy là nghề của cháu chọn thì cháu phải làm.
Jimmy decided to give Hui the chance to come and train at Koto. He hoped that this opportunity would help change her life for the better. She was very grateful and spent much of her spare time studying hard. She was able to learn quickly and soon began helping some of the other children with their studies.
Often the problem with Koto is that the trainees want to learn so much that occasionally have to say, no, it's your day off, you have to go home, you know, we have to teach somebody else now.
Koto doesn't just help children that have come to Hanoi from the countryside. There are also many street kids that have been brought up in the city. Ha was born in Hanoi, and when Jimmy met her, she was running a tea stall on the roadside near the restaurant.
It was her mother's stall, but her mother was on dialysis. When they could afford dialysis, that she would have dialysis, and so was often quite ill, and Miss Ha would work that stall from 5:30 in the morning until 10 o'clock that night, basically, and might make the equivalent of Australian maybe $1.
Even after Ha started at Koto, staff discovered that she was going back to her tea stall after work to try and make enough money to pay for her mother's treatment.
When I go into her house and there's not much furnishing or not much photos of happy memories of family reunion or family holiday or anything like that, but just a photo, single photo of her in her uniform, her chef uniform, just right beside her mom's bed. It also shows me very clearly that how proud she is of her little girl. On a personal note, when her mother passed away, I made a promise to her mom that I would look after her daughter, her little girl.
It was a very difficult time. She felt very alone for quite some time. And it was always her fear, because her mother was quite sick, so it was a fear that she had for a long, long time that she'd expressed to me. And that was her worst thing that was ever going to happen.
In the future, Jimmy hopes to set up a Koto in 4 other Vietnamese locations, including one in the ancient market town of Hoi An.
Working as a tour guide, I often travel to Hoi An. It's a small little port town, central Vietnam. It's a place that tourists often visits there, and the kids pretty much grew up in Hoi An, being exposed to tourism.
On one of Jimmy's trips to Hoi An, he met a street kid called Phi. He was so impressed by his positive attitude that he wanted to find out more about him. He discovered that Phi's father was a local fisherman, but a chest illness prevents him continuing his profession. And so his mother runs a little food stall from their home to get some money.
Phi always struck me as a person with a very well-mannered and highly intelligent individual. And when I got to know his family better and visiting his situation, he sold postcards, and he moved on selling newspapers, and he moved on to doing any jobs he could possibly find just to be supportive for growing his family's income.
And he asked me, do I want to join with Koto training? So I asked him what is Koto. He said Koto is no one teach one. Koto will help the kids from the road who was selling postcard, newspaper or shoe shine, or the kids with no family, poor kids. So unlucky, it's like 4 months after that, I can come to Koto.
It would be hard for Phi to leave his family, as they relied on his income. But eventually they all agreed that the short-term sacrifice would be worthwhile for the long-term benefits that this opportunity would provide. And so he took the long train trip to Hanoi to start his apprenticeship at Koto.
It was really important for Koto to help Phi so he can be a positive role model for a lot of other kids.
In his first year, Phi learned front of house and bar duties. And despite feeling homesick from time to time, he did well, and Jimmy was pleased with his success.
And it's not about me, it's not about anyone that comes to help Koto, it's always about the kids. And I guess I see my role in the future is to simply stand in the background and just clap.
In March 2002, Koto proudly held its first ever student graduation. and the first 18 trainees passed with flying colours.
It was a very emotional night and very exciting. I was so happy and so proud. And the kids were proud for what they had achieved, and they were standing up to get their awards, and their parents had come in from the countryside, and it was just very overwhelming for everybody. All of the trainees that graduated are in jobs. Trainees that graduated 18 months ago are still in employment. So I think that we have a lot of success stories.
Long is now working as the head chef at a resort in South Vietnam and is able to support his family financially.
I feel a bit scared for him. I feel that he will become successful. But to me, he's always going to be my little brother.
Hui is working as front of house at Koto and is still helping the other kids whenever she can.
I see her now, and I'm just really, really proud of her.
My dream is I can be a trainer in the future, so I can pass my knowledge to others. So.
Ha is now working as head chef at Koto and is also teaching the new students.
She's just completely transformed into a beautiful, confident young woman, and she just keep on getting better and better.
Phi is now back in Hoi An, working in a 5-star hotel and acting as a positive role model for the younger kids there.
He got here today is because he made it happen, not anybody else.
In the future, I would like to open a Koto in Hoi An, and I will try to help the kids in Hoi An.
Now the next batch of Koto students are being trained, some of them by the first graduates, showing that this project is sustainable.
The greatest accomplishment for someone that's helped you is to see you stand on your own 2 feet. And when you've reached your destination, it's for you to come back and help someone else. Because if you know one, then you should teach one. And it's as simple as that.
Since Jimmy started Koto 4 years ago, over 130 students have graduated, and many of them have been employed by some of the top hotels and restaurants all over Vietnam.
It's quite an amazing experience because you walk in there now, seeing them in their uniform, speaking Spanish, very confident young adults. You just can't help but to be very proud of them.
I think even though I was working at the UN and I was working on projects that were supposed to be, changing the whole development for people, and some of the projects were incredibly effective, but to actually see the change on an individual's life just means so much more, and it makes it really tangible.
Jimmy could now start thinking about his next dream, which is to open Kotos in other parts of Vietnam and other countries, including Australia. In March 2004, Jimmy decided to take Ha and Hui with him to Australia to help him with his fundraising program.
I can be a trainer in the future.
The girls went to the Melbourne Food and Wine Festival to learn about the different kinds of foods and spices available in Australia. Jimmy felt it was important for the girls to learn that even in a wealthy country like Australia, there are street people too.
When the girls fed the homeless in Sydney with just enough faith, and it was a very, very moving and profound effect on them. I guess that it was only a couple of years ago, they were actually in the same boat, and not knowing where your next meal come from.
When Jimmy does open a Koto in Australia, he hopes that some of his graduates will be able to come with him to pass on their skills to the young Australian street kids and help them have a better future.
The most I could ever expect once they leave the Koto training program is for them to know themselves and be confident in themselves and have faith in themselves. Because it's only then, when they have that they're able to know one, teach one, and pass that on. I could ask them to be a good person, but then they'll be asking too much. Because if they know themselves, then they already are.
Next week, the state of the world through the eyes of Bob Geldof, Elliot Gould and Rick Stein. They're grumpy old men and they're having their say next Tuesday night at 8.